please join me to welcome Dr. Uprety give us a wonderful speech. Please, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pan. Professor Mang, thank you so much. Actually, it's quite intimidating. The conference hall is so impressive. The university, coming to this university, and the Wentao International Forum. This is a fantastic opportunity for me. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizer and those who invited me for their kind invitation. And Dr. Pan has been kind enough to introduce me, and I have been a lawyer for more than 3 decades. And today's, because I have been with international organizations all throughout my life, I would like to talk about international development. But as you already know, I'm only a lawyer. And you will say, what is a lawyer going to talk about development? Development should be, if we go through the definitions, development is growth, development is progress, development is infrastructure, development is social engineering, and etc., etc. But what is a lawyer going to do and talk about development? So that's a question that is quite genuine. What I would like to say here is, based on my experience of development lawyering in 3 international organizations, which are commonly referred to as international financial institutions, I would like to share my insight, not as an economist, but as a lawyer. How a lawyer sees development or gets involved into development work in these institutions in the world. So first of all, I do not want to spend too much time on defining development, because you go through internet, you will find thousands of definitions, and each and every institution that has been created to deal with development has one way or the other found a way to define development. Let's not go into all that. We all know what we are referring to. Only one sentence definition which I like was provided long time ago by a Nobel laureate, Gunnar Myrdal. I may not pronounce his name very well, but Gunnar Myrdal is the one who said, upward movement. Development is upward movement of an entire society. An upward movement of an entire society. That is what development is about. So whatever you do in that context can be defined as development. As a lawyer, I would ask, why development? Because I need to find a way to link development work with lawyering work. So I will say, why development? For 3 main reasons. In the world, there is inequity, there is insufficiency, and which leads to injustice. So you have inequity because the right to equity of everybody is being breached by somebody, somewhere, either an institution or an individual. Insufficiency because there is need for food, shelter, health, education, and so forth, and that is not being given to the entire world, to everybody. And these two things lead to injustice. Therefore, justice is being blurred. And we also talk about whose development. Normally, the traditional way of developing, somebody coming from outside and okay, take this, take that, essentially provisioning of goods and services to a society in a place or to a group of people or in a country without much consultation with the beneficiaries. That is gone now. That is the traditional way of development, but that does not work. That is not the correct approach. The new correct, which I think is correct approach, is right-based development. And here I do not want to go into too much legalese. We are only talking about a development pattern, a development need that is defined by the beneficiaries themselves. They will tell whoever is the developer what they want, how they want, and where they want, when they want. And that kind of development that that is in this kind of development that a lawyer can also play a good role. So traditional gun, new this right-based based development is becoming more and more valid. Development helps to equalize rights and obligations. We are talking about rights of citizens, citizenry at large, and it also creates obligations for states and those who are supposed to take care of the larger citizenry. So this is broadly why this is in this realm that I think development lawyering becomes relevant. But when we talk about development, fine, we define it our way, that is also fine, but there is still need of institutions or people or groups or sectors who will come and facilitate development. That development exercise has to be facilitated. So I'm now going to talk about facilitators of development. And this is where I bring the examples of international development agencies, which commonly referred to as IFIs, International Financial Institutions. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the likes of the World Bank, IFAD, ADB, and etc., etc. These institutions that were created for the purpose of bringing some change in societies, in countries. Their main objective is to finance development. They do these, the financing of these developments through loans. They can do it through grants. They can do it through other technical assistance, or they can also have some other instruments that they use to go and help people. How do these institutions work? I'm not going to be able to tell you each and every institution how they operate, but the general structure of these IFIs is that there will be shareholders. When you have shareholders, whoever has more share will have more say. They will have more votes. Smaller the countries or smaller the shareholder, lower the power. Bigger the shareholder, bigger the power. There is a governance structure. There will be, in all these institutions, there will be a governance structure where you have a board of governors, you have an executive board, which is actually really powerful and calls all the shots, and you have a secretariat which will be led by a CEO, by a president with staff, and these are the staff who will be involved in development business. They are the ones who are deployed. In addition to doing other things, they are the ones who are deployed to carry out or to help implement development projects. One important thing from a lawyer's perspective is that these international organizations, these IFIs, that is the term that I will henceforth use, are subjects of international law. What does it mean? They are all created by treaty. They are created mostly by countries that are themselves subjects of international law. And they create something, and by delegation that institution becomes a subject of international law. Why am I insisting on this is to emphasize that when you are a subject of international law, you don't necessarily care about local law. A law of XYZ country will not necessarily prevail upon these international organizations. So that's why they are completely independent authorities, independent bodies. Here I'm essentially talking about all the multilateral development banks. There are regional development banks. There are sub-regional development banks. There can be international organizations with 2 countries. There can be international organizations with 189 countries. You have the UN with the entirety of the world. AIIB, which is in Beijing, has already 89 members. That institution was only created some 2.5 years ago. You have ADB, which has 1 set of countries. So members, however the institution is created, there will be membership. They will be part of the board of governors, and from them will be selected a group of board of directors based on their voting power, and they will be the real cabinet, real ministry, council of ministers, we can call them. They decide everything. But we will try to focus not on all these small, not all the international organizations with 2 or 3 members. We will be trying to we will try to talk about big ones like the World Bank, ADB, to a limited extent AIIB. Well, these institutions I introduced as facilitators of development. Yes, they have a lot of money. They have contributions from all over the world, from the members. They have a mandate to go and develop countries or areas, but they have also limitations. And these IFIs, the World Bank, ADB, etc., are not like the United Nations. UN has a lot of political power. These IFIs do not have political power. They don't have the political mandate. UN actually could decide to go and send a troop in a country, into a country. IFIs, they cannot. They are not like those associations or organizations which are created only essentially for political motive or that kind of cooperation like the ASEAN. I see a lot of friends from Asia, so SAARC. This is not like SAARC or the ASEAN kind. They are different. They also have a requirement which can be taken as a strength, but can also be taken as a limitation. These institutions can make decisions, financing decisions, only on the basis of economic considerations. They cannot make any development-related or financing decisions on the basis of political considerations. As a result, many things that these institutions want to do or would be interested to do, they cannot do it because they don't have the mandate for that. They have to have all economic consideration. And I will share with you a little bit later the problems that institutions face because of this particular provision. So these institutions are also required to deal with disputed territories. We probably, not all of us know, but in the world there are many disputed territories. Everywhere you go, there will be some area which will be disputed. So these institutions have to be extra careful while dealing with disputed territories. They also have to be extra careful while dealing with international waterways, international rivers. International waterway is a term that lawyers use to talk about rivers. This is the lawyer's way of creating elegance. But it is rivers, international rivers. When there is an international river, these international financial institutions will have problems. They have to be extra careful. That can also be considered as an opportunity to do something better, but these are also limitations because whenever you want to do a project in a specific country and you have 7 riparians or 11 riparians. You go to Africa, you have Nile River which has 11 riparians. Any project that you want to do in one of the riparian countries will be a nightmare for international organizations that have to abide by the rule of international waterway, because they need to obtain clearance from all other riparian countries, which is very difficult, and especially when relation between countries are difficult, and there are many like that. The other country is not going to say yes to anything that they want to do. So international organizations have this kind of restriction. Yet, with all these restrictions, these institutions are still thriving. They do a lot of projects in pretty much all the countries. So wherever you go, you will see World Bank financed this, ADB financed that. I mean, these are or you go to South American part, you will see IADB, etc. So they still finance. What do? They finance set of activities, which are called projects. They sometimes also finance things that are called programs, but let us not go into that debate. It is a different set of discussion. But they provide funds to carry out a set of activities in a specific country. These kinds of activities can only be in one country, in which case the institution will have to deal with one counterpart. But many times they do projects in several countries. Nowadays they call it regional projects or multi-country projects. So when you have to do something which is not only in one country but in multiple countries, then you have to deal with multiple players, multiple counterparts, multiple political and legal system, and multiple interest. So what do they finance? They practically finance everything. So they finance infrastructure, they build bridges and roads and airports and railways. They also do soft investments for training, advisory services, etc. They also do some reform work, sectoral reform, adjustment reform. All these institutions can do and have done. And please bear in mind that the oldest IFI is the World Bank, created some 75 years ago. So the most experience that comes is from that institution. That institution has pretty much done everything in every sector, every area, every country. They also do some legal, policy, or institutional reform work. Again, maybe there are only very few activities that these institutions cannot finance. Restricted, some exclusion. There is a list that excludes some types of projects that you cannot do. Otherwise, they can do anything they want, provided that this notion of economic consideration is used. Because after all, this is an institution. These are institutions that get funds from either replenishment or from charity also in some cases. But anyway, so these funds have to be provided to borrowers, to countries that want to develop on the basis of economic considerations. These IFIs normally will not say we don't give funds because you have this type of political system, or we give funds because you have this type of political system. And this is the beauty of IFIs compared to bilaterals. Bilateral agencies can put a lot of other conditions. IFIs will not. Their conditions will be essentially related to the activities that they are financing, and a set of things that they will want the countries to do will be to protect their own investment, because their investment is global investment. But whenever these institutions want to invest money or finance projects in countries, there are always obstacles. Who has not seen obstacles everywhere? There are protest groups everywhere. Basically, I think that there are 4 types of main obstacles. Obstacles to development. One is interest group. Whatever country that may be, small or big, whenever an international financing institution wants to invest something in some sector, there will be an interest group which will start heated debate and will try to block or reap some additional benefit out of that. But there is interest group. This is very difficult for IFIs to manage. Can be difficult. There is also internal, in the country or in the client's area, there can be bureaucracy that will not be very much interested. Because these institutions are subjects of international law, they can only enter into a country with the permission of a subject of international law, and that is represented by governments. In most cases, IFI's counterparts will be Ministry, Treasury or Ministry of Finance kind of institution. So you have to go through them. These ministries and these institutions can be people, after all, these are all manned by people, right? So human beings will be there, they have their own interest, they may be very supportive and facilitate everything, or they may not be very supportive and try to create obstacles. Bureaucracy can be very tough, even on international organizations that want to invest funds in these countries. There is also intervening management, not in the country, in the institution itself. All these institutions have sets of rules and norms and standards and guidelines and policies. These are all passed, approved by senior management or board of governors or board of directors. These have to be applied first. World Bank had at one point of time about 8,000 rules to be followed for one project to do. Now they have streamlined, it is much less, but still they had about 8,000 rules. Which one to follow, which one not to follow, and how to follow. You have guidance advisors everywhere, and they try to block. They take very, everybody has a right. Whenever they have a decision-making power, they take stringent position, and they say maybe a conservative position, it will be easy to say don't do, rather than do, because there is no risk for them, right? It's everywhere the same, whether in a country or in an international organization. But more you have rules, more headache you have for staff, professionals who want to be in development. So you have too many rules, too many processes also, by the way. For one thing to be done, you have to run the same thing through several people, and then it takes 3 months. By the time this whole thing is done, the real beneficiaries who needed that fund to do something, it's too late. Another investor would have come and already completed the work or started the work. So these kinds of things also exist. International financial institutions are not immune. And you have most important geopolitical externalities. When you do some kind of project in a country, you have naturally these natural calamities and disasters. I'm not talking, these are also in a sense externalities, but I'm essentially talking about how the neighbor reacts to that. Neighbors relation, when you do projects, for the project to be successful, you also need surrounding countries to also be in favor of that. And it rarely is an easy job. This can be tricky, so geopolitical externalities can be important. How do you manage these, how do these institutions manage these kinds of obstacles? There are many, and obviously in today's session I'm not going to list them all. It will be unfair on you. But there are two main things. Whenever they see a problem inside a country, the interest groups, heavy bureaucracy, or that kind of problem inside a country, then the idea is to use national champions. Identifying institutions or individuals who are credible or organizations that are already doing that. So using national champions to make your case, to defend what you are planning to do in the future. And then sometimes you have countries, because of their own bilateral or multilateral relation, they are at odds in doing things. So at that point, these international financial institutions would also facilitate that by providing their good offices. Now I would like your permission to share a story. In India and Pakistan, in 47, until that time, these two were one single country. Right? In 47, there was partition. The same country became two countries, Pakistan and India. What was happening until then was that a huge irrigation system, which used the water of the Indus River, which is a very long river, about 1,800 miles. It starts in China, goes through India and Pakistan, It has several tributaries, 6 very important ones. So this river, the irrigation system, which used the water of this watershed, the Indus watershed, was broken into 2. The source of water, or the headwater, went into India, and the lower part went into Pakistan. Partition happened. Until then, it was no problem because it was the same country. So if there were irrigation issues, then the provincial government would intervene because they had only one master. So the master would intervene and use his or her judgment to allocate water. But then it suddenly became 2 countries, and those who know the history of India-Pakistan partition, they know that many killings have also happened. So it was very thorny situation, very tough situation for people. But then the water was divided. Headwater went to India, the lower part went into Pakistan. What happened 1 week after conflict started? 47, partition happened. The first conflict that actually Pakistan and India had was on the issue of water. And that has not ended. They regularly, time to time, the conflict erupts, and they have to deal with they have to use other means to resolve the crisis. So at that time, what happened was, because of this, Pakistan thought that water will be controlled by India, therefore our security is completely at stake, and India would not budge, because that is how it was, right? So they needed to do something to divide the water. It was for irrigation as well as for consumption, but essentially for irrigation. And mind you, Pakistan is in both these areas, this was the irrigation area where water was very important. And until then, it was the largest irrigation channel in the world. Until then. So this was divided, so there was tension, lots of tension happened, and international world realized that this was going to be a big problem. And if India and Pakistan really started to fight, had a war, then it would be very bad for other countries, but also very bad for donor agencies. World Bank was a financier, was hoping to finance a lot of projects in Pakistan, was also hoping to finance a lot of projects in India, and also wanted to have an area which was safe. So through different channels, and I will not go into too much detail, but through different channels, the World Bank succeeded in getting the acceptance of the 2 countries that World Bank would provide its good offices. So in 1950, after the World Bank provided its good offices, there was no treaty until then between the to share the water of the Indus River system. But they needed to do something. They needed a treaty. Nobody wanted until then to even talk. So the World Bank said, okay, we will provide the good offices, you come here, and we start discussion. In 1950, meeting started, and there were delegations from both countries, so negotiations started. There were proposals from India, there were proposals from Pakistan, one proposal being rejected by the other, and another country's proposal being again rejected by the other. World Bank also proposed its own proposal as a suggestion. That was also rejected. So anyway, this thing went on and on and on. But luckily, the World Bank was providing its good offices. So the tension was contained. War did not actually happen. They would go back, but they would be called again, and negotiation would start again. And so ultimately, in 1960, a treaty between India and Pakistan was signed. And that is the treaty is quite famous nowadays. It's called the Indus Waters Treaty of 1960. That is still valid. It is a huge, very detailed, very technical with so many annexes and schedules and schedules to the annex, and etc. It's very thick, very detailed treaty between the two, and that is one treaty which is also signed by the World Bank. World Bank is not. Indus is it does not flow into World Bank, right? But World Bank is still a signatory. It's a unique from a legal perspective. For lawyers, it is an important thing. Actually, it is water sharing between India and Pakistan, and one of the signatories is also the World Bank. It has some role to play. I will share this in a short while. But before that, how it happened is, until then there was discussion between the two countries, including the World Bank, actually, all the parties, but World Bank was only providing good offices. So they wanted to discuss the quantum of water. There was, okay, X million, X cubic meter of water for us, Y million for you, and then that is not enough for us. We should get more. So this was the kind of scenario and the discussions. It never ended. It was always not enough. So what they decided, what the World Bank and international community decided is that maybe the idea of sharing water of the same river is not a good idea. Maybe we should share the rivers. So that is the first first treaty in modern days where water is not being shared, but but rivers are being shared. So now what happens is there are basically 6 major rivers, Indus main, and 3 rivers now belong to India, where India can do whatever it wants, provided that it does not hurt Pakistan's some interests that are defined in the treaty. And 3 other rivers belong to Pakistan, where it can do whatever it wants, provided that it does not hurt the other country. So this treaty was signed, but still before signing, there were problems. They said, but what happens until, because in the treaty context, they were also supposed to build few dams, and those dams were needed to give water security to Pakistan. So they need to build dams. What happens until then? Who is going to pay for that? Again, another round of conflict, tension. But that is when, again, good offices play a role. World Bank said, okay, we are financier, we will provide X amount of money, we will mobilize funds for you to build 2 major dams at the time, so that the waters that you have lost because of the treaty will be compensated by the dam. So all these funds came from donor agencies, funding agencies, including the World Bank and many countries. So this went into a trust fund, and the money was also used to build the dam, etc. So the treaty was then signed, and the dams have also been built. So the point I am highlighting here is, there are 2 points that I am highlighting, and I have to highlight that. All that I have said here is, there is a role for lawyer. All these institutional issues that I shared, there is a role for lawyer. Treaty negotiation, obviously you will agree that there is a role for lawyers. So, and then meanwhile, development is not necessarily and only the mandate of economists. Sorry to say that. It's also, they can also use lawyers to get a better result. So what would be my final kind of observation? Is that IFIs actually are unique. These are a very, very separate, different kind of thing. These are not government agencies. These are not NGOs. These are not private entities. These are completely different things. You go into an IFI, you are in an entirely new system. You are in a place where rules are different. As I said, they don't follow local rules. Then you have their own policies that become Bible for everybody. They become very important. You have to follow, otherwise you may be fired. Meanwhile, those policies may or may not make sense in some circumstances. Then in that case, you have to deal with exceptions to those policy requirements. So all these are there is a role for lawyers, but also this is what a development professional would do. So these IFIs are unique. they can be, because of their unique status, because they are treaty based, because they are not subjected to national law of any country, they can maintain certain independence. And because of the criteria that I earlier shared, which was that any consideration has to be economic but not political, means that a lot of institutions will trust these institutions because they won't intervene politically. Now, because of this political intervention issue, these IFIs are also facing other problems. Whenever they want to get involved in some reforms, but are not necessarily political, but still they can be defined as political, therefore they can be blocked. You do, for example, civil service reform. It's not actually political. We are not talking about political system, but it becomes very difficult. So they have to find a way to take different channels, etc., whatever I said already. What these institutions try to do is, or have to try to do, because they have also failed in many respects, ensure that implementing professionals are available. In many cases, and in many continents also, projects are done in a rush because there is a crisis, something happens, and then you deploy a few people to do something because of rush, because of urgency. And these things happen when you have earthquake, you have tsunami, you have genocide. Actually, I used to work on Rwanda once upon a time. And then I don't know how many here know where Rwanda is. It is in Africa. It's a small landlocked country, very small. In 1994, in a span of 1 week, 800,000 people were killed. In 1 week only. So luckily or unluckily, I was working on that country at that time. I know of the situation before the genocide happened, and I also know of the situation immediately after the genocide happened. And so when you have 800,000 people killed, international agencies are compelled to send troops immediately to intervene, to rescue. They are not going to follow all the rules. This is a humanitarian crisis. So they have to deploy people. So in those situations, they go, they rush, they prepare something, and then nobody is there to implement. Then it can become a problem. It can become a problem for the country. It can also become a problem for the institution. So the idea is to avoid these kinds of situations. Of course, you cannot always avoid, but these institutions would try to avoid these kinds of situation and try to implement or develop a cadre of implementing professionals that they are available. Next point, again, quite important from a legal perspective, is that whenever you do anything, any project in a country, you have to deal with the right institution. If you do not deal with the right institution, and if there is no right institution in place, the project is not going to be successful. So it is the due diligence work to identify, which institution is right, is a nightmare. In many countries, when I say that, people say, what is he talking about? But there are many countries where 3 institutions are doing the same thing. There are countries where, because of political reason, they have to give responsibilities to everybody, then nothing can happen because there is overlap of jurisdiction. There is overlap of responsibility. So it's very important to see, and this also happens, by the way, whenever there are water institutions. There's a lot of problem. So whenever institutions go to do something in a particular country, they have to know what the right institution is. Deal with the right institution and do full legal due diligence. There are also other legal issues. There are also other issues, which is budget. And again, as I said earlier, provide good officers when possible. So I think I will stop here, but I would like to take questions or provide additional comments if you have. I hope this was useful. Any question? Everybody understood everything about international development? Please feel free. Yeah? Any question will be welcome.
The term for providing good offices is actually meaning mediate.
Not necessarily mediation, because legally that would be a different connotation. You don't mediate. You just say you use. Let's say in a simple language, you come, you use our offices. We'll provide all the logistical assistance. We don't intervene. We'll provide you a computer. If you want us to write something, we will help you with somebody who can write. But we will not be dealing with your issues that are really critical for you. We don't have the expertise. It's not mediation. Mediation is a slightly different thing. But the treaty, the Indus Treaty that I talked about, has a very, very elaborate dispute resolution mechanism. It has, it's very complicated. Actually, it starts with a commission, Indus Commission, which is a bilateral commission. Then it goes to an independent, what is it called, neutral arbiter, a neutral expert, and then it goes to tribunal, permanent court of arbitration. So it's very complicated. And there is also a provision in between of mediating. Sometimes they use it. But otherwise, providing good offices is not actually mediation. It is only letting them use, let's say, honestly our offices, so that you bring everybody together. But there is a lot of weight when a big institution provides the good offices. Yes, sir.
So after like around 20 years in the World Bank, and how did you make transition from the World Bank to AIIB? And what's the difference between the mandates in the World Bank and also the AIIB? And my third question is, can you tell me the difference, since the AIIB is a relatively like a startup MDBS out of the 5 MDBS, so what's your impression of AIIB compared to the bank? And my fourth question is...
Oh.
Do you need a pen?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I remember too. But okay.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And my fourth question is, can you briefly let me know what's your function, what's your mandate while you're working at the bank, the World Bank?
Okay, two things. First, let me start with a simple one. What my mandate is. I'm a lawyer with World Bank. I deal with all these projects. So whenever this institution does an operation in any country, they have to have a lawyer, and I go and do the due diligence. I help them design legal transaction documents. So this is basically what I've been doing. I was with the World Bank for 25 years. 25 years. Worked, I think, on 45 countries in all. I have not worked in South America. Otherwise, I have worked in all continents. So that's the second thing. You said how I came here, or why I came here. It's quite interesting, actually. When AIIB was created, I was still in Washington with the World Bank, and the first general counsel who actually wrote the charter of AIIB, who is the author of the charter of AIIB, was a former staff of the World Bank, who happened to be 10 years, 15 years ago my manager. So they were, because at that time there was no one who wanted to even come and work. So they were fishing people, or they were trying to lure people to come. And they requested different international organizations to send a number of people to help establish. So at that time, because the general counsel here was my former boss, she wanted me to come here and help for some time. That second response to the second question. What is the difference? Actually, legally speaking, AIIB is like the World Bank. There is no, this is the only institution which has membership open to everybody. World Bank is also an institution which has membership open to everybody. This one also, there are some criteria that need to be met, of course, but otherwise it's open. Whereas ADB membership will only be Asia, You go to IADB membership, we only be to those Latin American, South American countries. You have African Development Bank in Africa, where membership also is limited. World Bank and AIIB are two institutions that are really anyone can become, any member, any country from any geographical or continent can become a member. You have also, when AIIB was created in China, in Shanghai, another bank was also created called now they call it a New Development Bank, but in those days they used to commonly refer to it as BRICS Bank. And now the BRICS word is, I don't know, that is not used, it's more New Development Bank. So New Development Bank has only 5 members, and that's limited to 5 members. No one else can, they may change it later, but right now this is 5 members, so only 5 membership can do procurement, only members can work. AIIB is global actually. So that is, AIIB in that sense is very similar to the World Bank. It is also a treaty-based international organization, which means that countries who became members signed a treaty and agreed to abide by the rules of the treaty. One slight difference that would be worth mentioning is that AIIB was actually, has this, in this voting system, they have 2 types of membership in terms of voting. You have regional members versus non-regional members. You have regional members, mean those who are from the region and those who were part of the creation of the institution. If they put the same amount of money, if they have the same amount of share, and the same amount of share is also put by a country which is not a regional member, then the power will be different. Those who are from the region, they have something extra voting power. There is a method of calculation, and based on that calculation, those countries have get more power. So those are the 3 questions that I think I answered. The 4th one was?
You already covered.
I did? Okay, thank you. But did I cover it?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And you said, what do I see in 10 years' time for AIIB? I personally, decided to come here because this was a lifetime opportunity to work in an institution which was just being created, and the big part of the world had doubts about. But I said that was a lifetime opportunity. So that is one reason I came. It is like working at the United Nations in 1945 or 44, right? So that kind of experience, nobody can get it. The first time when I came here, I was number 31. There were only 31 people. The building was not even, actually, I don't know whether you've seen the building, but the building was really 21 floor, 31 people. Imagine, it was so scary. So, there was no cafeteria. So these are basic logistic things. I always, in laughing, I always say, apart from mopping the floor, I think we did everything there. Mopping the floor we did not do because there were carpets. Otherwise, probably we would have this done. But now it's done. Now it's 200 people. It's done. But the experience that I personally, and along with several of my friends who came, and many have left also, that experience, I think, is a lifetime experience. Nobody can have it. You don't know how difficult and how interesting, how challenging it is to work in this kind of environment, and that is why I decided to quit the US and come to Beijing. Oh, please.
I'd like to know about the funding process, how this international finance institution, how they fund the countries. Is the country who, ask for the money, or the institution itself, are interested in funding that particular country? That is my first question. And the second question is, you said that, international finance institutions are not guided by, I mean, any such political mandate of the countries. I mean, like they are free from the political influence of the countries. So, but looking at the World Bank history, you know, changing. I mean, from I'm talking about the health policy that they changed. Like, you know, first it was about the utilitarian, I mean, approach, like health for all. But they were influenced by, I mean, the two countries' decision on changing from utilitarian to the market approach. So from health for all to the health, you know, you need to pay for the health. So in 1980s, the World Bank changed the policy from utilitarian to the market approach. So what do you think about, you know, I mean, how much the political interest of a country influences the international finance institution?
It's very interesting and quite a difficult question. So let me try to answer. First, your question was about how funding happens. Normally, these, not only World Bank, all the IFIs will go to the country upon request go to the country upon request. As I said, it's very important. These are treaty-based organizations, and these are our members. And you will go to the country if the country says, we need financial assistance in this sector. Come and assess. I'm simplifying. So there will be, then when a request comes, and in order to, by the way, to prepare the pipeline, there are systems, they meet regularly and etc. There is an annual meeting, they talk. So those things, these go without saying. But what happens is they will put a request. They will say, come and assess whether or not you can finance. This is our priority. This is part of our plan or whatever. I mean, so relevant counterpart will have to put the request, and only then these institutions will decide to go and finance something. Now, once the request has come, does it automatically become a loan? I don't think so. It doesn't, because once there is a request, then there are people who will make assessments, go to the field. It depends on the country, because if I talked about World Bank, you have several types of clients. You have clients in Africa which have one set of rules that apply. You have clients in Asia, 2 or 3 varieties of clients in Asia where different rules apply. Some get more expensive funds. Some get very concessional funds. Some even get grants. So these details, I don't think we will have time to talk about these details, but these are not always the same. But the primary point is they will, the government will request for the institution to come and check. And then team will be sent, team will make assessment, whether or not it is part of the strategy of the institution. If a country says, come and finance our, there have been cases, by the way, come and finance our, what was it in Djibouti, there is something called khat. It's a sort of, it has some hallucination effect. It's a sort of drug. But this is very common, like tobacco in other countries. They wanted the World Bank to go and finance some industries in this sector. But until at that time, it was not permissible. So the World Bank, when they went there and did the assessment, experts went there, they did the assessment and they said, no, we cannot do it. They may also look at whether or not the country whether there is really need, because these institutions are supposed to be the lender of last resort. Meaning, if you don't get money from elsewhere, then you come to us. That's the notion of lender of last resort. So that will also be something that needs to be factored. So if suppose that there is a request, the project is valid, assessment is cleared, all the requirements have been fulfilled, then please, World Bank is a bank. It wants to lend money. when a bank gets a client, they will lend money. So it's very simple. Third, this health question that you said, I mean, I do not know about health issue per se, but naturally these institutions change their approach. In the 60s, when when the World Bank was created, you know, it was created. Why it was created? It was to rebuild Europe. Immediately after the Second World War, many European countries were completely destroyed. So based on that, the charter was written, and World Bank, at that time it used to be called IBRD, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, was created. Guess who was the first borrower of IBRD? France. Second borrower was Portugal. So then after that, the decolonization process also started, and now France is where it is, right? So let's not talk about that, but I think that has helped. But then decolonization process also started. Many countries in Africa became independent. When the World Bank in 1945 was created, India was also not an independent country. So the dynamics was different. So then when decolonization started, many new members started to come, and they started to become members of these institutions, and demands started to pour. And then that's where expert economists come into play. They use this term demand-based versus supply-based. If you have a lot of a country which wants to borrow a lot of money and has already exhausted its borrowing capacity, these institutions may even say no. But otherwise, if all these criteria are met, they will go there. Now, what it used to do in the 70s and what they do now are totally different things. The world has changed. Needs have changed, logic has changed. At one point, World Bank was so market. It did not do anything which would go against the market. Nowadays, they do lots of projects that contradict the notion of market. So these things change. But what is important is that whatever they do within the framework of within a framework, a valid framework, which is accepted by all the member countries, at least the representatives, the board of directors. I think I have answered all your questions. Thank you. Yes.
In the future, what will the relationship between some developed country like USA and the AIIB, and the relationship will be like, or their attitude towards the AIIB? I wonder, what do you think?
You are talking about USA, or you are talking about other countries that are not members?
Like USA and Japan.
Well, yeah, you are actually asking a very, very valid question. This is something that nobody will be able to answer as yet. But AIIB is a completely open institution. And this is my personal view. Based on what I have seen, it's only my personal view. Right now I can't speak for Japan, I can't speak for USA, right? But I think USA will join. Not now, it will take some time. There is no way out, because AIB will become an important player in the world. So, but about Japan, I don't know, because Japan not coming here, I mean, there are two things. One is ADB issue, right? And the second is there are some political issues which I do not want to necessarily dwell on. But I think USA will, you will one day remember me. I said within 10 years, USA will join. Will have to join, they have no choice. At AIIB, there are 15 staff from the USA. I mean, business is, you can't do business. This institution has will have a lot of investments in the future. If you are not supporting the institution, it will not be easy to reap the benefit out of it, because creation of an institution is also useful for not only for staff who work there, they make a lot of money, but also for others. There's a lot of business opportunities, development opportunities for stakeholders, etc. So I think that I see a lot of hope. But one thing is sure, AIIB I think will become a big institution, because it is quite global. It has no limited membership.
Alright, so there are like quite a lot of these institutions now in the world, right? Financial institutions, and a lot of them operate in many countries. So maybe like 2 of them operate in the same country as well, naturally. And these institutions, they are they finance it according to development. So does it ever happen that a project that one institution has financed conflicts with another project of another institution? And if that happens, what kind of solution do you give to them?
No, there is definitely competing interest, of course. I mean, when you have now, in Asia, you have countries that are members of AIIB. There are countries members of ADB. And there are also countries that naturally are members of World Bank. So you can also look at it from a different angle. Needs are big. So they have now, if the institutions cannot anymore go there and impose its own rules. There are competitors. And these institutions are smart. They know this. So there is always discussion between these institutions. There are forums where they meet all the time. Okay, how does it work practically? Okay, annual meeting of World Bank, annual meeting of ADB. I'm talking about Asia because we are in China. Now we better talk about Asia, right? In Asia, so there are annual meetings. All the representatives of these institutions will be there, and there will be separate meetings for every country. Country will say, okay, we need $100 million. Who can provide $100 million? Okay, World Bank will say, I will provide 80 million. ADB will say 10 million. Another agency can say 10 million. They will coordinate. So there is, of course, in some issues, there are always exceptions. And I remember of a project I was working, and I don't want to mention the name, but there were ADB and World Bank actually fighting for the same project. And for about 10 years, the relation between ADB and World Bank went sour because the country decided to go with ADB and ignored World Bank. And at that time, they said, we do not want World Bank because World Bank rules are very stringent, very tough. Because of time constraint, I did not go into all those details, but there are also lots of norms that are very complicated, and I know some other colleagues will come and they will talk about those. But so this can happen. But majority of the time, cases, this does not happen because the needs are enormous. I mean, no country, says I don't need anything. Will be able to say I don't need anything. So these donor agencies, they meet, they have their strategy meetings, they talk to the country, and they share cost. And it's also good for these institutions to share cost. This way they can diversify, and they can be involved in bigger and more important projects. But exceptions are always there. There can be tension, but it's unusual, I will say. I was working I once worked on a project which used to be called CASA 1000. It is an electricity project. It was the project under the project. Electricity was going to be now it is being done. It was to be generated in 2 countries in Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. The electricity would flow through an international grid through the most difficult part of Afghanistan, and the electricity would be supplied and purchased in Pakistan. So this project was one complicated project. There were more than 20 agreements, treaties, whatnot were signed. And this was financed by many agencies, because these kinds of huge projects cannot be only undertaken by one institution. So there is actually a lot of opportunity for international IFIs to also become more prominent, but also for countries to use rationally and judiciously the funds that they get from donor agencies. Not all donor agency financing institutions will provide loans or the financing on the same terms. Sometimes there are a lot of economists here, I know. country has to think of its macro situation and will have to decide as to what it wants to do, whether it wants to borrow money from this agency or wants to does not want to borrow money from that institution. These are all questions that economists will have to answer. But those situations are always possible, but they are not necessarily rare simply because there are still not enough development agencies, because the needs are even bigger. If we go to Africa, you will see Africa is one of the biggest beneficiary of grants of World Bank. In Asia, there is no. I think Afghanistan right now is getting some World Bank grant, but not other countries. But in Africa, you have majority of the countries that are still receiving grants. So situations can be different. It depends on the country whether they want to be smart and use these institutions in their favor, or B, simply saying yes, like in those old days, saying yes to whatever the donor agencies ask for. You had a question, I think.
Yeah, I think you already answered a part of it. I was interested to know when a country needs to go for IFIs. When a country decides whether they want to approach ADB or AIIB or World Bank, because you already mentioned World Bank has been to every country. So my question is, when does a country really needs to go for these institutions? And sometimes, is there any cases where the IFIs will tell that you don't need to take loans or grants from us, but the better way would be to finance yourself, find or mobilize funds within the country or something like that?
Very often it does. That's where the notion of lender of last resort comes also. If you have a country which already is has a great economy, is in a very good economic status, coming to borrow money, which actually is subsidized money, whatever they get from these agencies are not something that you easily get in the local market. So they will be careful. They may say, no, you go to the private sector, no, you go to this institution. They can say that. But again, you have to, there will be an assessment. If the country in reality does not need money but wants to just borrow money because it is cheap and put it in its own safe deposit, this is not going to be accepted. There are rules and criteria that checklist, and IMF is there, by the way. I did not talk about IMF because it's a very technical kind of institution, but IMF is there. IMF says no, then no other IFI can do anything. So recently, some countries have been prohibited from taking loans from other IFIs because IMF has said you cannot borrow any money from any other country unless you do X, Y, and Z. So those things are possible. There is a system, this is quite well controlled actually. Any other question? Otherwise I will add one thing, because I only spoke about these public money part, right? When we talk about IFIs, if you have any question, please feel free. Otherwise, I'm giving an additional information, which is that these agencies, some are, to deal with public sector. Like, for example, World Bank. When I say World Bank, it's actually 5 institutions in one chunk, right? World Bank Group. You have World Bank IDA, which is a soft arm, which provides cheaper money, but that cheap money also is divided into several types. Some countries get the cheapest, some get the cheaper one, but in the middle, some most expensive. There are varieties. So, and you have IBRD, which is LIBOR rate, basically, it's a little bit expensive. If you have a country from Africa, they even may get, 80% of the countries in Africa are getting grants. They don't even have to repay. This would be IDA. There will be IBRD, and there will be there is also something called IFC. You may have heard of that. IFC is the private sector wing of the World Bank. That institution deals with private sector, invests in private sector business. It's not public, it's private. It does not have to follow the same kinds of rules. It has its own criteria. It will go and buy equity in a particular country in a company. It can become a shareholder of a company. It can do that type of investment. It does not have to go through the Ministry of Finance or the Treasury. So those things are also available. That was World Bank. The beauty of AIIB, now talking back about AIIB, is that AIIB charter is a mixture of World Bank's IFC and World Bank. Meaning, in World Bank, the World Bank wing itself would not be able to invest money in equity in a particular company in a country. They will have to use the IFC vehicle to do that. On the other hand, in AIIB charter is quite flexible, and it can deal with public. It can deal with public sector, but it can also directly invest in private sector. So it's a mixture of IFC mandate and IBRD and IDA mandate. So that is actually a difference between a big difference between the World Bank and IFC. Right?
Yeah, I think we can conclude.
Yeah. Okay. So last chance for you to ask questions if you have any. Otherwise, I would like to thank you for your pay. Yeah. Any question? Sure. Please.
I wonder about the risk management. If a country they don't repay the money from the AIIB, how to do it?
You see, the repayment part, it will not be actually easy to talk about repayment risk and give the example of AIIB, because AIIB was only created 2 years ago. So all its loans they are still being disbursed, right? They are not due for payment. So we cannot say which country will not pay or will pay. But otherwise, as per the rules, yes, if it's a public money and will not be repaid, then the institution will have to take recourses. These things have happened in old institutions. Like in ADB it happens, in World Bank it happens a lot. There are countries where you have, there are countries that do not pay because they simply cannot pay. Otherwise, in these institutions, it is very difficult for countries not to not pay. They will pay, they will be interested to pay, because one loan payment in a timely fashion will lead to other loans. Otherwise, what will happen if you have a country which is in arrear, then all funding to that country will stop. And if a major institution like the World Bank has stopped lending, imagine the rating of the country. No other lender will go to that country. Meanwhile, not only lenders, many private sector companies, big ones, they will say we cannot go. Nowadays, many private sector companies go because they know that it is part of IMF. IMF has credit, World Bank has 20 projects there. So then in that case, they have confidence in the market, and they will go and they will invest money. So that's how they tackle. But from a legal perspective, if, for example, in ADB or World Bank, loan were not repaid on time, there are rules that automatically get triggered. So they will send reminders, then they will send another reminder, and then third reminder, they will stop disbursement on that on several loans that they have. Imagine a country which has 20 loans which are disbursing, and if any one of the loans will stop, then they cannot even distribute salary to the staff. So these things are very rare, but this has happened. For example, Somalia. What a coincidence, because my first assignment when I joined the bank was Somalia. Many of you do not know what happened in 91, 92. Somalia completely collapsed. And that country, even now, has not repaid its debt to the World Bank, because country does not exist. So those risks are there, but there is a system to manage. But because there are those risks, does not mean that you should not go to another country. Sudan, for example, stayed in arrear for so many years because they did not care about the World Bank. And it was in arrear, so World Bank also could not go there. But with regard to AIIB, it will be too premature to talk about it, because it has only started to, it has only about 18 loans that it has provided. All are were done last year or 1.5 years ago, so the repayments have not come. If one day repayments do not happen, then AIIB will have to take action.
No question?
Okay. So I just wanted, you have a question? No. Okay. So thank you. I just wanted to thank you very much for your patience. I hope whatever I wanted to share, I have tried my best, and I hope it was useful. And thank you also for your very interesting questions. Thank you very much. And thank you.
Thank you.